You could be wiser as an educated advisor. Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money-colored commentator. On today's show, protecting your practice and your clients, part 2 of our series on best practices for financial professionals with attorney Ilya Lerma. And it's all here on Let's Get Down to Business. Welcome to the second segment, Ilya.
Hi, Steve.
Well, if you're still breathing as a financial professional after that first segment, you're saying, wow, I better check what I'm doing, my protocols, it's best practices. But if you're a consumer watching this show, listen, it's your right, it's your money, it's your life, it's your assets that are on the line. And you have every right to drill this guy or gal who's in front of you, holding them out as a professional money person. So whatever it is, even if it's just your insurance agent for property casualty, you have every right to do that. Who reads the policy? Ilya, nobody reads these policies. I'm a consumer, I don't even read them, right? And then all of a sudden we have a problem and we say, well, somebody didn't send me an executive summary of this. This thing is for insomnia. If I had a real problem sleeping, I'd go and pull it from my file. I want to talk about, though, for advisors, E&O, errors and omissions policy. I'm sorry, I was naive. When I first got into the business 35 years ago, I wrote the big check. It was painful for it. And then I said, well, but I'm golden and I'm covered. And then I meet a person like you and I'm like, what do you mean I'm not covered? Well, talk about errors and omissions.
The magic about insurance is that it's all covered until it isn't. And unfortunately, you don't know that it's not covered until there's a claim. And it's a lot like jumping out of an airplane with a bad parachute and not knowing until you're midair that you've got a bad parachute. And you certainly don't want to find yourself in that situation. What you need to do is familiarize yourself with the kinds of claims specifically for your licensure. Look them up on the internet. The internet's a particularly useful tool for just finding out what kinds of claims are being made against individuals in your industry. But I do encourage my clients and professionals to read their insurance policies, and that's because you familiarize yourself with insurance terms. That way, the first time you're becoming familiar is not in your lawyer's office as you're defending your first claim. And anybody who tells you that this is a standard policy and is referencing a 50, 70, 30-page document, there's really nothing standard about insurance. You will see common coverages and you'll see common exclusions, but to say that something is standard when it applies to a whole host of different kinds of professionals is misleading.
It's just so difficult to believe. I'm just trying to be the normal person watching this. If I'm a consumer, I go, I'm not going to read that. I'm depending on my relationship with my agent, my advisor, to bring me up to speed. And I'd love to get a little crib sheet or a little summary statement that would help me understand it as a consumer. So I find it difficult sometimes because I know we should all do these things, but who does it?
Well, and it is difficult because just as your clients turn to you as financial professionals and look to you for advice, you may be turning to your own insurance professional and making sure that they're guiding you correctly. And an insurance professional is not supposed to be an order taker. You're not supposed to go in there and know exactly what you need and check off the box. An insurance producer, just as a financial planner, has an obligation to ensure that they are conveying the proper coverage and the options that you have for those types of coverage, and it gives you a reasonable opportunity to select the most important coverages to what you do. But again, just as you're going to request that your client doesn't fully rely on your advice and you may make recommendations for them to educate themselves, you're going to have to do the same thing in terms of securing your own insurance. And part of that means you're going to have to get down and dirty with the language of insurance policies, somewhat.
And you have to be able to convey that to the client or the policy holder and or owner. Now, when I first met you, and there's a confession of C. Savant here coming up, meeting Ilya was like a fear of God moment, right? I mean, you're mostly on the defender of the consumer side. I don't see too many part of your resume that talks about you're defending us agents, us advisors. Would that be a fair statement?
That's exactly fair.
Okay, so when I first met you, I thought, man, I'm going to get my head handed to me. So I want to be able to talk about what we can depend on, and part of E&O coverage is I can't depend on outright intentional defraud. I can't defraud anybody. I can't do something intentionally to benefit myself and hurt the client. So my contract is not going to pay that.
That's correct. It absolutely will not cover for the things that we talked about in the first segment, such as intentional harms, willful, fraudulent acts, intents to deceive. E&O coverages do not cover that, although they do cover negligence and the negligent misrepresentation claims. It doesn't cover things that some people might expect, and this is why reading your policy might be important, particularly focus on the exclusion section, because that's where you're going to find any activities that wouldn't be covered. So for instance, any volunteer or charity work that you do may not be covered by your E&O coverage. Punitive damages, if you have engaged excessively in some negligent conduct, let's say you have some questionable hiring practices and you have a couple people in your office with a checkered past and you get hit for a punitive damage claim, your E&O policy is not likely to cover those types of claims as well. You may not be covered for tortious harms, things like libel, slander, bodily injury claims, so you might want to have a companion coverage general liability policy that would cover you in cases of that nature. Well,
I think one of the first things I saw when I came into the business was they told us to get errors and omissions. They also told us to get an umbrella policy. They told us that, you need some hiring defense in case you're homeowners or your car, and to be careful on what is owned by you, so if you're going to get sued, they don't come after all your other assets. There's a lot of division here and protection. But personal risk, I'm trying to think of, I just want to have a practice. I just want to help benefit people. I don't want to be a bad person, and we all make mistakes. I've made mine in my 35 career. I'm certainly not sinless. I try not to, hopefully not intentional either. But personal exposure, now, when I talk about personal exposure to a client, I'm with and we're going to get into this in a later segment, but certain clients demand a lot more follow-up. If I'm dealing with a geriatric and she's single and her husband's died and he did all the finance, I do not want to take over. I just want to help. I need to find out who the beneficiaries are. I need to track these kind of people down. So I'm trying to look for things that'll help me defend against my personal exposure in my practice.
Well, the first thing is to have a good plan in place. I mean, as much as even attorneys want to help and take on clients, I'm not doing my clients any favors by taking on a case that I can't give proper attention to, that's outside the scope of my expertise, or that I'm familiar with attorneys who would do a much better job handling. So a lot of it is client selection. You're going to have to, the onus is on you to make the determination as to whether or not you can actually handle the responsibility that comes with each individual client. And if it turns out that they need a little more maintenance than you can provide, you're going to thank yourself later, because if you're not there when that very needy client needs to meet with you, and then they have documentation of all the times they've called you and haven't received messages, it looks bad if there's a claim. It doesn't mean the claim will be successful, but it does mean that all of a sudden your conduct comes into question, because again, you held yourself out as someone willing to take on this client when you knew what the responsibilities would be, and then you're not following through.
Well, you just brought up a very painful reminder here. We have a client, they called in a claim in our office. They called the claim for one of our agents in the office. And he was uptight, of course. He's never went through anything like this. And she didn't sound very happy on the phone voicemail. He did not call her back. And he didn't call her back the second time she called. And the third time, by the time she called the fourth time, she's calling the branch manager, FINRA, everybody up and down the food chain of authority. I'm talking, talking about a very unhappy lady who is not even getting the satisfaction of a callback. Now, how important is it if we suspect that there's going to be a claim? How important is communication?
Oh, communication is critical. And that again falls back on every licensed professional. If you're a physician, if you're an attorney, if you're an insurance producer, if you're a financial advisor, if your client is expecting communication and you're avoiding them, particularly over a long period of time, then you've really invited some problems. Again, you may not have committed any kind of wrong, but when you're actively avoiding client communications, and now in the advent of voice messaging, text text messages, email, where there is actually a paper trail of the number of times they have reached out to you and you haven't bothered to respond to their calls, that's problematic, and it makes you look bad. It makes it implicates you in a way that had you responded and been more proactive. And so the way to guard against that are to have policies and protocols in place for yourself and for your office to ensure that every client call gets returned within 72 hours. That's very reasonable. And if you're doing that on an active basis, you will be surprised at the number of people whose concerns are allied and then they don't feel the need to actually go out and speak to an attorney like me. They actually, and you're going to find this is very rare with attorneys. I've had clients come into me and say, I am having this issue with a physician or an insurance professional, and I've actually recommended go back and have some communication, and if it doesn't resolve, then let's see if there's a claim to be had here. And at least 3 out of 3 occasions that's happened to me in 20 years, it's turned out that the problem really wasn't a breach of the professional's duty so much as it was a lack of communication and willingness to work with the person who felt like they'd been harmed.
There's a lot of heartache that could have been saved just by returning the call.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's such a big thing. You have so much information that you can provide to your clients, that you can give to them. The benefit of your knowledge and expertise, 5 minutes on the phone will save you 6 months in dealing with lawyers and potential claims and demand letters.
You do not want to go to arbitration, I promise. Don't forget to watch our next segment on Documentation is the First Line of Defense, Part 3 in our series on best practices for financial professionals. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always check your tax consultant, legal counsel, or compliance officer. And don't forget to subscribe to my consumer show, Steve Savant's Money, The Name of the Game, daily content that you can post on your site, social media accounts, and database distribution. I'm Steve Savant. Thanks for watching.